Answers on Aging program with your hosts, Todd, Whatley, and Weiner. The Answers on Aging show helps seniors know about all the services available in Northwest Arkansas and beyond. The show focuses on helping seniors enjoy life to its fullest by getting answers and learning of the services in this region. Get ready to call in with your questions or comments for Todd and Ian on legal, medical, and financial issues, that and more on the Answers on Aging program with special guests and announcements on senior activities every Wednesday from 9 to 10. Now your hosts of Answers on Aging, Todd and Ian.
Good morning, Northwest Arkansas. This is the Answers on Aging radio show, and my name's Todd Whatley, and I am here and with a new joy for life. Let's say it's Christmas season. It's beautiful outside. It's not super cold, and I will go into this a little bit later. But I kind of shared some of my medical issues back in March and April. Had a medical scare and went in to get it checked out again and got a really good report. So I was a little scared there for a little bit, thinking this thing's getting worse, but it's not. And so life is good. And Christmas today is my wife's birthday. Happy birthday, Captain. She is 29 plus a few. I married really young. And so, but today's her birthday. So she's probably not listening. She's a nurse at Mercy Ear, Nose, and Throat Clinic. She's probably not listening, but
happy birthday anyway.
Happy birthday. She can go back and watch this to prove that I did say it live. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I am so thankful for all of our listeners. I may have a special listener today. My cousin is visiting up here, and we had dinner last night, and he said he was going to listen, so I'm assuming he is. So, hey, man, thanks for listening. I appreciate you spending time with us. And there we go. Okay. Hang on a second. There we go. Okay. So, hey Ian, how are you?
Todd, doing well. I'm a bass today.
Ian's decided to sing bass for a gospel
I've
music.
picked up a few spots on the radio, 2 to 4 a.m.
He sounds like Tommy doing a commercial. Exactly. So Ian's a little bit under the weather, but not so much he can't do the show today. So we're very thankful that he's here. And we have a great show today. We're going to follow up. We've gotten quite a few comments from last week's show where we kind of pulled back the curtain on the financial field. And if you missed it, I'm sorry. We can't go back through it again. But we are going to just after some conversations and some things, we're going to offer some assistance to people, free help to look at things and make sure things are right. But we'll get into that in just a second. So, do you have any announcements or anything?
Let's do the phone numbers. Yep. So please call in 800-767-7979. Again, that's 1-800-767-7979 or 479-636-7979.
Yeah. So I do want to say real quick, the Colonel came in just before the show started and said that Gary from Flower Mound, Texas, I don't even know where that is, but I'm sure he listens by internet, and he said he had bought my book and even called in to give an unsolicited testimonial on that, and I am very appreciative of that. I think the book is good. I mean, I've put 25 years of my life into it to help people understand how they can lose money. And I pull back the curtain on just about everything. One of those is investment advisors, fees, and how they get paid and different things. I pull it back on attorneys, estate planning attorneys, how sometimes you go in and if you utter the word trust, you're walking out with a trust if you need it or not. So I talk about some questions that you should be asking your attorney and some things that if they jump right into this, they're probably not looking out for your best interest and you need to get a second opinion. And so we talk about scams. We talk about Medicare. Not that there's there is nothing wrong with Medicare, but you just need to go every year and check it. And we're past that season now, but just know that every single year you should go get your Medicare looked at and re-evaluate. So if you're interested in the book, I don't make much from it. And it's $14.99 on Amazon, and I'll just tell you from that I get $5.
$5, that's a lot.
Amazon keeps $10 of it, so it's fine. Some of it goes to publishing cost, whatever. So I'm not getting rich off this book. I promise you, it is truly a labor of love, and I want that to be out there for people. You can go to Amazon. The best way to search it is just put in my name, TODDWHATLEY, and you'll see two books. It's the same book with two different covers on it. I did the first cover, wasn't happy with it, changed the cover and changed the title. So either book, same book. Just, I would appreciate it if you get it. You can download it. If you're a Kindle subscriber with Amazon, you can get it for free.
There you go.
And it's bizarre. It's like, well, how do you make money from that? I get paid by each page that you read.
Fascinating.
I get like 2/100ths of a cent for every page that you read.
See, there's that guy out there that's like, Todd's trying to take advantage of folks.
Yeah.
So there it is. That's how he's doing it. That's
2/100ths of a cent for you reading a page in my book. So I'm not getting rich. I promise you. There are many other things, but I think it's a good book. It hopefully
you will learn something.
Yeah.
You will save more than $15.
You will save way more than $15. All right.
So there you have it.
Thank you. How's the stock market?
I don't know. Haven't looked.
I love that about you. So
this is a fun conversation.
Sure.
So, if you are looking, why?
I want to see how much money I made.
Oh, okay.
I honestly look at it more than he does. I'm like, hey, dude, the investment portfolio you just put me in, it made money this week. And he's like, well, good. But I had nothing to do with that. And when it loses, please remember, I had nothing to do with that.
This is one of those things where, people have been conditioned to be paying attention to the constant news cycles, everything that's going on, the bulls and the bears. What I'm going to tell you is there's zero data that suggests that is helpful for you in the long term.
Okay.
That's it's tough unless you are a hedge fund manager.
Uh-huh.
And if you're a hedge fund manager listening to this, we have other problems because you're probably not very good.
Right.
But the small little fluctuations of the market every single day, that should not make a meaningful impact on your long-term financial picture. And if it does, we're doing stuff wrong.
Hold that thought for just one second. Kathy on Facebook, I see your question, and I will get to it in just a second. Okay, it's a great question. Everybody has that question. Just like I say, if you have a question, I promise you 50 other people out there have the very same question. So please call. Someone just called, and someone put a question on Facebook that I will get to in just 1 second. So let's get this phone call real quick, and then I want to get back to that point. Hey, caller, thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Hey, morning. Hey, I wanted to ask you about bond issues. And specifically, over in Texas right now, they've got that attorney general that is about as crooked as you can get. And I'm wondering, how stable would Texas bond issues be if they have a crooked attorney general? School bond issues, sewer bond issues, even corporate bond issues. If the attorney general can all of a sudden just commit some massive crime and make some weird declaration, is it safe to invest in Texas?
Wow, that's a good question. Okay,
that's a big one. So I will preface my answer with, I'm not giving anyone specific investment, tax, or legal advice here. Okay, so these are just things to think about. The thing that we have to remember about bonds is these are debt instruments. You are a creditor. Okay, and so what that means is if it's a company, if it's a state, if it's a government, you want to be very confident that they are going to be able to repay their debt obligation to you. And so, if you have concerns about that, then you shouldn't be buying those bonds.
Right.
And bond markets are quite efficient, actually. The stock market, there are fluctuations all the time. And this kind of goes to the other point.
Sometimes it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. In short periods of time, stock prices are unpredictable. Over the long run, they're actually quite predictable.
Sure.
Bond prices are even more predictable. Because there are just certain things that go into what changes the price of bonds, and markets are really good at picking that up. And so if a bond issuer is paying an above average coupon or interest, you've got to wonder why. The demand is not there, and so the interest is higher. So, just like with stocks, it's like, should we invest in stocks? Should we invest in bonds? Well, it depends on what your goals are. But if you're concerned about a company going bankrupt, you shouldn't own their stock or their bonds.
Sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's really
and state governments are probably a little more fragile than federal government. If you've been listening, I just took the test to become Series 65 licensed, and they are very hard on us to say the no risk investment is the federal T-bill. Okay. It's like 3 months long, and that interest rate is your risk-free rate of return. Because there is it's funny because I know our federal government, they're going to pay the bills, their T-bills. Okay. But it is considered the zero risk investment. Everything else above that there is some risk to it. And so, just like Ian said, if you think Texas is not going to honor those, don't invest in it.
Yeah. Okay. And, really when we're talking about individual things like that, my question is always, okay, why are we doing that? There was a gentleman that called in last week and was asking about a private credit fund from a big private equity firm. My first question in those kind of situations is, why is this the thing that we're thinking about? And usually it's because there's an advisor on the other side that makes a little bit of extra money selling that to them. I mean, I'm just saying,
I was about to be sarcastic. I said, the reason is because there's a good commission with it.
There is. Yeah. And listen, we have access, my partner and I run what's called a registered investment advisor. Okay. We have access to everything under the sun that you could want. We have hedge funds, we have private credit, we have private investments. I mean, we have access to some of the largest hedge funds in the world. You know who those are appropriate for?
Rich people.
And if you're not sure if it's appropriate for you, guess what? It's not.
It's not.
Yeah. Unless you're a qualified purchaser. And if you're a qualified purchaser, you know that you are.
Yeah.
And if not, you shouldn't be investing in those. and I'm not trying to beat anybody up, but it's like, these are the things that people need to understand.
Okay. So did that answer your question?
Well, yeah, but there were kind of two sectors that I was specifically interested in. One in the commercial sector would be alternative energy. Say, for example, solar and wind power. Texas has set it up so that they cannot buy electricity across state lines.
Wow.
So if someone in Arkansas tried to, put up a solar, bank of solar panels and try to sell them across the state line, it's against the law. They will not allow, even though it may be 40 feet from the border, they will not allow it. And what raised the hairs on the back of my neck when I heard about this law was Enron. And the way Enron got caught 20 years ago was that they were buying and selling electricity across Mexico border as well as the Nevada-Arizona borders in California. And the state of California is not prosecuting Enron like they should, but the federal government sure did. And so Enron got caught because of the FERC, the electrical, the agency that monitors electricity across state lines. So when Texas made this law saying that they could not exchange electricity from Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, it really put the fear of God into me that they were going to screw their own citizens, with the same kind of Enron pricing.
Yeah.
And sure enough, they did. You can notice it when they had the big freeze down there, and prices just went through the roof. They had basically an auction. That electricity went from 10 cents a kilowatt hour to $2 a kilowatt hour. And down in Southern California 20 years ago, it went to $1,700 a kilowatt hour. It from 11 cents a kilowatt hour. So Enron ended up looting California. I think they took $71 billion in the course of a few weeks. And that was the commercial sector. The municipal sector would be schools. And if I understand right, in stable economy, if you've got a whole bunch of school bond issues and they're going to have a steady payout, you can use those as collateral for some other business opportunity. Well, if all of a sudden there's this big campaign to go to privatize schools and to defund the public schools, what's going to happen with municipal bond issues on schools? And so, looking at Texas, they apparently hate public schools, and they're doing their best to dumb down the kids and force them into private schools. And so the municipal bond issues for school districts would really be in jeopardy with that. And so, those are just two sectors that I'd be looking at.
Well, there's a couple of things that are in there, and really what you're talking about is concentration risk. Okay, there's legislative risk and concentration risk, and the answer to these things is diversification. Okay, to really oversimplify things, unless you have so much money that you can lose a lot of it, you need to broadly diversify the portfolio.
Yeah.
And so, Texas is a huge economy. They're going to do what they're going to do. We can't control that. And there are a number of issues there. We could spend a ton of time on that. Thankfully, I'm not a politician. And so, my opinion doesn't matter in that situation. Sure. But the way to handle those issues is to be much more broadly diversified.
And sit down with your own investment guy. I mean, that can be Ian or just whoever, but sit down with him, go through this. And thanks for calling, man. That's a very good perspective. Okay. Appreciate that.
It's important to know what you own.
Yep.
And to know why you own it.
Why you own it. I think people don't understand that part of it. So, okay, back on, just because you're not looking at the stock market every day doesn't mean that you're not concerned about it. Mm-hmm. I mean, definitely the stock market has its place. And one of the things we want to talk about, I want to answer this question real quick, and then let's jump into our big thing, which I think that is a great segue, is so many people get into a quote investment, which is actually an insurance product that says, hey, it'll never go down. And you'll get this much money for the rest of your life, and life is good and everything's great. And sometimes it's not. Okay. Yeah. Sometimes that quote investment is an insurance product known as an annuity. Mm-hmm. And I know there's a lot of people, because I see them in my office, that every dime that they have are in these annuities. Yeah. And I ask them, why'd you do it? It'll never go down. But the drawback is it may go up, but it will never go up as much as it could go up if it was in something else. And so when you get that security on one end, you're going to lose the benefit on the other end. And that's something that I want us to talk about. And particularly if you bought this 3 years ago when interest rates were 2%, and now they're 4%, there's some huge opportunities for you to look at your annuity, look at your investment, and possibly do something different with it. So let's talk about that in just a second. So Facebook listener Kathy asked me about something that a lot of people ask about, and that is a DNR. Okay. A DNR stands for do not resuscitate. That is a document. It's similar to your living will. When I do documents, we do a living will, even for someone who's absolutely healthy. I have one, and it says, once I am at the end of my life and I am not going to get better, I'm going to die soon, and I can no longer make decisions, I don't want you doing stuff to me. Okay. Once I'm at that point, I don't want to be brought back, because I'm going to die anyway. I don't want a feeding tube. I don't want antibiotics. I don't want surgery. I don't want all of these things. And so people get confused by a DNR. A DNR specifically is a document that you do with your doctor. You sit down with your doctor goes through this and says, look, you have a terminal condition, you're going to die from this, and by me as your doctor signing this, when you pass out, when your heart stops, they will not bring you back. Okay. And that's what a lot of people want. Now, I don't know how this happens. I'm not sure why doctors do it, but sometimes I see people up walking around, and there's a horrible story about a 50-year-old who thought she was dying and she got a DNR. She got better and didn't revoke it.
Oh, man.
And then fell and, had some fairly minor injury, went to the rehab to get better. And she was eating dinner and choked.
Oh my gosh.
And the staff could not, because of this DNR, it's a medical order to do not resuscitate. She choked and died when one push on her belly would have ejected the thing, and she could have survived and carried on a pretty good life, but she had a DNR and they could not bring her back. Wow. It's like, oh my God. So typically a DNR is something that you do when you're at your final place. When you go into hospice, you have a DNR because the purpose of hospice is to help in your passing. You don't want to pass and then them bring you back, okay? That's why you're there. So you have a DNR in hospice when you go to a nursing home. A lot of people will say you should do a DNR, or else if your heart stops or if you start having problems, the nurses are going to come in. They're going to bring you back. And a lot of people is like, I'm at a nursing home. I'm ready to die. I came here to die. But if you don't do a DNR and you die, they're going to bring you back. So the difference between a DNR and a living will is the DNR is done with your physician, with a consultation with your physician, and it is a medical order to not bring you back, to not do things to bring you back. A living will, it only becomes effective once those three things are in place: irreversible, incurable, you're going to die soon, 6 months, and you are no longer able to make decisions. So once those three things are in place, that document comes into play, and if you pass, they will let you pass.
So this is an extreme example, but it's a good example of what we're really talking about today. Kind of the theme of the show is you might think you're done.
Mm-hmm.
You might think you've got the work done.
Yeah, true.
When should you double check that?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the overarching question,
mm-hmm.
whether that's your estate planning, whether that's your portfolio,
mm-hmm.
whether that's the annuities.
Mm-hmm.
When should those be reviewed? So let's start with estate planning.
Okay. My recommendation is 5 years is a fair amount of time for things to happen.
Yeah.
The kids are 5 years older. Some may have been minors. Now they're above the age of 18. They weren't married 5 years ago. They're married now. Situations have changed. My kid was, ne'er-do-well and was terrible with money, but got married and is doing well. And, things are different now. And so I recommend that every 5 years, no longer than 5 years, that you look at this. I have started a program in my office for clients that after we do their initial work, they pay a I think, small fee each year, and we will look at their estate planning documents every year for free.
Update them.
Okay, for that fee. Okay, they come in, we look at it, we absolutely redo their powers of attorney so that they're always up to date. We look at their will, we talk about it every single year to make sure that everything is up to date. And if you don't take advantage of that program, I recommend you pay to come in every 5 years to just make sure that everything's up to date.
I would say even more frequently than 5 years.
Sure.
So in my world,
yeah.
5 years ago, I had one less family member.
Well, and interest rates were drastically different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, in my world, I went from playing man defense to zone defense now. So we've got, I have a 4-year-old at home.
You're
and
outnumbered.
We are just with her. I'm outnumbered, honestly, but and I love her so much. But this is how much can change. I mean, think of what else has happened in the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
We've had some pretty interesting elections. We've had some interesting. things happen in the world. I don't know if you've been sleeping, everything's exactly the same as it was in 2017, right?
Yeah.
But, we're joking about this, but you can blink in 5 years, it's gone.
Sure.
And, if your documents were drafted at that period of time, not only is there probably language that needs to be updated. I mean, Todd, if you're reviewing you talk about power of attorney being the most important document that someone has. When you review those that other attorneys write, how often would you say those are well drafted?
Less than 10% of the time.
So let me translate that. More than 9 out of 10 powers of attorney, which are the most important documents that someone should have, that other attorneys draft. Now, you're an expert in this. And you've only done it for, 25 years?
25 years. And I don't just say, oh, yeah, we need to redo this. I will show you in writing this sentence right here. Here's the implications of the sentence, or the fact that you don't have a sentence in your power of attorney means that I can't help you when you need nursing home care. You will lose everything that you have because there's one sentence not in your power of attorney. Or there is one sentence that has restrictions on it that prevents me from saving your entire estate.
So one sentence down to one word could be the difference between literally hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like that big of a deal. I mean, they got it done a while ago. Why pay twice, right?
A lawyer did it.
Yeah.
So of course it's fine.
Yeah.
No, it's like your podiatrist treating your heart. He's a doctor.
Yeah.
And he treated my heart. I'm sure that was great advice.
It can be a great doctor.
Yeah. He's a great podiatrist.
He can be a great podiatrist.
He probably doesn't know much about hearts.
Yeah. And that's okay. That's not a bad thing.
No.
They say that the most expensive lawyer is when you hire the wrong one, because then you got to hire the right one again.
That's true.
And so,
to fix it,
we're joking about this stuff because it's challenging. And we want to get you to chuckle a little bit so you can think about it, but it's in reality, this is stuff that you want to have taken care of so that you don't have to worry about it.
Okay. Yep. So let's take this to financial stuff. So I mentioned last week, one of the things that I said that I'd said it to be, to bring the point around, and it was kind of funny. It's like, would you hire a handyman who walked into your house with a hammer? That's the only tool on his belt was a hammer, and you hired him to fix stuff. He's going to do something. He's going to use his hammer to do something. It's probably not the best fix, but by George, it's fixed. And it's not pretty. But and just because that's all he has, that's what he's going to use to fix whatever's wrong. Yep. When you go to a quote financial advisor
or financial professional, if they call themselves a financial professional, that's when you really need to be concerned.
Oh,
that's even worse than financial advisor.
And this person that you're talking to may present themselves as financial stuff, but I guarantee you're going to walk out of there with one product because that's all they can sell. And that's concerning. Okay. Yeah. Annuities sometimes are correct, right?
It's a tool.
It's
a product. There's a place for that product in folks' plans, but we have to ask why. What is the purpose of it? And if that's the only thing that someone can use, it's probably not done. Well, I think it's fair enough that we can say this. If the only thing that an advisor can do is annuities, you're not getting advice that's in your best interest. I mean, by law, technically, they do not have to act in your best interest.
Right.
An insurance-only advisor has a suitability standard that is exactly. It's easier to get around than the broker-dealer that we talked about.
Sure.
So, I mean, the standard is on the floor for them. So you are unequivocally, if you're working with someone who only has an insurance license, you are unequivocally not going to get advice that's in your best interest. They're not required to.
That's
a fact. There are cases, there are clients that we use annuities in portfolios.
Sure.
And there's a reason for that.
Yep.
And the reason is we use them as a bond replacement.
Okay.
Typically.
Bonds
9 out of 10 times.
They're counter to the stock market, or counter to interest rates. When interest rates are down, bonds are up. interest rates are up, bonds are down, and so
even more, I mean, really, what we want to do, especially if someone is within 5 years of retiring, what are we trying to do with bonds in the portfolio? We're trying to bring some stability, and typically the way that this is talked about is bonds are conservative or they're safe, right? And I try to hammer this. The last 2 years have showed us that that's not actually accurate.
No, it's not.
In fact, in the last bond drawdown that we've had was the worst period of time for bonds in U.S. history. You just lived through it over the last 2 years.
Wow.
Bonds, the bond index and the S&P, when they were down, their lowest point, they were only the only difference was about 0.5%.
And is that because we went from historically low interest rates to higher interest rates?
That's exactly what it was.
Okay.
And here's the thing. Everybody knew, anybody who has any financial savvy at all knew exactly what would happen. Exactly. So, and here's the problem. The head of the Fed got up and said, hey, I'm going to raise rates 6 times next year. You'd be shocked to find out he actually raised them 7 times.
Yeah.
And so when that happens, when rates go up, the price of bonds goes down. There's a known inverse relationship.
Well, so I'm sure every investment advisor in the country said, oh, I need to get my clients out of bonds or change their bond portfolio. So I'm sure everyone out there got a phone call from their advisor to say, hey, we've just been given this pamphlet to say you need to change, right?
You would be amazed. So it is so much worse than just that. The answer is no.
Oh,
Todd.
okay. Why?
It's first of all, you would be shocked at how the bar is so low for advisors, Todd. It is so low. I mean, some of the stuff that I have seen recommended is just absolutely unbelievable. And I guess it wouldn't surprise you because you see the other side of advisors. But what makes it worse is typically the call that people got from their advisor was, hey, just hang in there, stick to the plan. It's going to, it'll come back. It'll recover. Right. And if you have an advisor, you've probably had that phone call. Okay. Now that phone call can be fine. I've made those phone calls, but the reason why is what we have to draw at. We talked about earlier, what do you own and why do you own it? If you have clarity about those two things, and really the third is, what does it cost to own it? How much are you paying to own it?
Sure.
That can help you to stay the course when you need to stay the course. But if the reason that you own it is because that's what the advisor said, because that's what the home office said for him to sell you,
or that's the only thing,
thing they could sell you, that's not a good answer.
Right.
And so what the big problem with hanging on to a large part of your portfolio in bonds, you talked about we were in a really low interest rate environment historically. And so what happened was advisors would go to lower quality bonds that were paying a higher percentage. Now, and so there's 2 ways that happens. They go out for a longer duration, meaning instead of owning, short-term treasuries or something,
right,
they go for longer-term bonds and bonds that have a lower credit rating to get higher yields.
Like you mentioned at the very beginning, if a bond is offering a high interest rate, there's a reason.
There's a reason.
Because that's an incentive to buy this, because normally there's a good chance you may not get not a good chance, there is a chance that you may not get your money back.
Yep.
So we're going to give you some interest rate while it's still in effect.
Higher risk, higher reward.
Exactly.
That's the principle. And so what that was happening over, 2013, 14, 15, all the way up until, really 2020, 21.
Okay.
Right. And so as the bond portfolio is getting a longer duration and getting higher interest rates, the credit quality is going down. So when interest rates rise in the environment that we talked about, the longer duration you have, the more fluctuation there is.
Okay. Let's use real examples. So in 2020, when interest rates were what? 2%?
2%. Yeah.
Okay. So someone sells a bond at 3%.
Yep.
Well, that's a whole interest rate higher. Great. And let's sell it for 10 years so that you're going to get 1% higher than interest for the next 10 years. Great. Let's buy that.
Yep.
Well, now today, 3 years later, interest rates are 5 or 6%. You're at 3
for like a 6-month treasury, you know?
Okay.
So you can take very little risk and get, you know, almost double the return.
Right. And so you're stuck in this bond. And so bonds are $1,000. Okay. You spend $1,000 to buy this bond and it's at 2%. Well, now, since interest rates are higher, for someone to buy this bond at 3% when the prevailing interest is 4%, they're going to pay $800 for this bond.
They're going to get it at a discount so that the average price, the average return is the same. Yeah.
So 10 years from now, when they sell it for $1,000, they paid $800. There's $200 plus their interest. That kind of makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But you, as the bond buyer, 3 years ago at $1,000, you're going to lose $200.
Mm-hmm.
That's why when interest rates go up, the bond prices go down.
Yep. Okay. And the market does this naturally because these are understood quantities. And so, you know, if you're 30 years from retirement, fine, no big deal. Now, you shouldn't have any bonds in your portfolio if that's the case. But if you are in retirement and you have to, you know, use your assets to create income, this becomes a problem, right? Because let's say the stock portion of your portfolio is down. Okay. Well, if the stock portion of your portfolio is down, say you have 1,000 shares and they were worth $1 million last year, you still have the same 1,000 shares. Now they're worth $500,000. Let's use an extreme example.
Sure.
You don't want to sell those 1,000 shares. You don't want to take 50 cents on the dollar, right? That's the only time you lose. Okay. It is when you're forced to sell at a price that you don't like. So the part of the portfolio that should be conservative is the part that, you know, if the higher volatility, the stock portion is down, you want to have something else to sell. Now, what that's historically supposed to be is bonds. The problem is when the bond portfolio is down just as much as the stock portfolio, now what do you do? This is a disaster, right? So that's where, in a well-designed portfolio, in my opinion, that's where an annuity comes into play. So what you're doing when you're purchasing an annuity, there's many types. I mean, this is a long conversation. You're transferring the risk of those bonds to the insurance company.
Sure.
Okay. So insurance is a risk transfer tool. That's what we have to understand. Life insurance is transferring the risk of dying too early to the insurance company. Okay. And they have the ability to spread that out over a lot of different people. So if we're using an annuity to transfer the bond risk to the insurance company, okay, it can make sense in the portfolio.
So what if someone bought an annuity 2 or 3 years ago when interest rates were very low, and they've looked at it now, but there's a 5 or 10% penalty if you cash it in?
Yep.
How would it make sense to cash that in today and put it into something new?
So this is such an interesting thing that I think it's pretty rare that people understand how these really work. So typically what we're talking about, if you have a variable annuity, call me please, because variable annuities, you're probably paying between 3 and 5% for the privilege of owning a variable annuity. It's outrageous.
Stock market.
Yeah. I mean, it's like unless you have so much money that you don't know what to do with it, there's no purpose to a variable annuity. Okay. So typically what we're talking about, and this is what we see with a lot of retirees, is these fixed indexed annuities. Okay. So what happens is they tend to have, you know, a contract length of between 5 and 15 years. Okay. Some of the longer ones. So what's happened? I just want to talk about what's actually happening here. Okay. So we take money and we buy a contract. Okay.
With an insurance company.
Let's say it's $100,000, just to make the math easy. So what the insurance company is doing, let's say it's a 10-year term, right? These are pretty common. So the insurance company is putting that $100,000 with a bunch of other people's money, and they're going to the market and they're buying long-term bonds. So they're going to an issuer like, let's say, Apple. Let's just use an interesting example here, okay? And they're saying, hey, we're going to buy $100 million worth of bonds this month. Now, do you think they're going to get a better deal on that than you and I would with $100,000?
Yes, absolutely.
And so that's what happens. So they're doing two things. They get a reduced price. They get a wholesale discount on the bonds, essentially. And they're going to hold it to maturity because their balance sheet is, 100, 200 years. They don't have the same timeline that we do.
You as the buyer signed a 10-year contract.
Yep.
And so they know, theoretically, they're going to have your money for 10 years.
Yep.
Or they get reimbursed if you cancel early.
Yep, and which is a surrender charge. This is what happens. So they're expecting to be able to use that block of money for that 10-year period of time. And there's a set interest rate essentially that they go into it. And so they look at that contract based on whatever the interest rate they were getting from those bonds at the time. So, and so they'll get, let's say, 3 years ago they got 2%, and they got another, 2% discount on the, buying the block. So they got essentially 4% they could work with. Okay.
Yep.
And so for that 10-year period, that's what's going to set, the fixed rate that you could get every year, or their budget to buy options. So when you have a fixed indexed annuity, what's happening is they're tracking the performance of a stock market index.
Yep.
Okay. And so this is how it works. If the index goes up, they're going to exercise that option. They're going to participate in that index. If it goes down, they're not going to exercise the option, and you get a 0 interest credit. Okay. So that's how these things work. And if it's done right, these can work and make sense.
Sure.
They really can.
Sure.
But where people have gotten stuck is, remember that 10-year contract period when interest rates were really low? Well, what's happening is the options budget for those contracts has gotten hammered. And so, I saw a contract that we replaced. This was one of the worst contracts I have ever seen in my entire life. The spread on the index, there are 18 different index options. Okay. So, and the cap on some of them was 1.75%.
And what does that mean?
So if the index did 10% that year, they would get 1.75%.
Okay. But it never goes down. Right.
But
you just lost 9%.
So this is a problem.
8.5%. Yeah.
And on the ones that were uncapped, because sometimes they don't have a cap,
sure, they
have what's called a spread. So the house keeps the first X percentage. In this case, the spread was 9.75%. I showed it to some of my colleagues, and they were like, I have a colleague that I've worked with. He has been in this industry for 33 years. He goes, I've never seen this.
So the stock market had to go up over 9% before the customer, the person, before they got a dime.
Yes. Wow. And because of the time that they bought it, and the options budget was so constrained. And so what happened?
Did this person know that? Did the owner of this know that?
I mean, if you sit down with, I would say 9 out of 10 insurance agents and say, hey, can you explain how a market value adjustment works? They're going to go, oh, what?
Yeah.
Because there's a whole function of the contract that we haven't even talked about yet. So, I mean, these are not simple instruments. Okay. And so there's a lot of nuance with this. But what can happen is, yes, you're not going to, your account value, is going to be protected based on the financial strength of the insurance company. That doesn't mean there's an opportunity for it to grow.
Right.
Now, so we're talking about all this stuff. We have an interesting period of time right now. When interest rates rise, this is good for insurance companies. Okay, let's think about this. What risk are we transferring to the insurance company? We're transferring the credit risk for these bonds, right?
Right.
But remember, we're in a higher interest rate environment than we have been for a long time. And so what happens is, when the insurance company can go buy bonds that are really safe and get 2 to 3 times the yield that they could 2 or 3 years ago, that makes these contracts really attractive right now. And so there's some good options to get out of bad contracts right now.
Okay, so explain how someone's looking, they've called their agent and said, hey, if I get out of this, you're going to lose $20,000.
Yeah.
Okay. But your option is, if you'll bring that to us and let us look at it, there are companies out there, since interest rates are so high, for that same amount of money, they will give you a $30,000 credit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So there's some of these contracts that have what's called a bonus. Okay. And we have to be really careful with these products. All right. And so this is an area where I almost don't like to talk about it, because people get taken advantage of all the time with this. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't talk about it and use precision. Okay. Because the right thing is not to do nothing. The right thing is to get the right help from people who actually care and understand how this stuff works. So the insurance company, they get a little bit of that sort of that extra yield when they buy when they buy those bonds at a discount, right? And so what they can do with that is they can do a couple different things. They can use it to go towards the options budget, or they can use it to go towards, say, a bonus up front, okay? And so where you mainly hear about these is in products that have an income rider, okay? Lifetime income, you can run out of money, you'll never run out of income.
Never run out of money.
You know, and so this is one of these things where in certain cases this can make sense. And I've used these before and it can make sense, but it's very specific. You got to really understand why. But there are other products that don't have an income rider. They're not meant for income. They're just meant as a bond replacement, okay? And they have an upfront bonus on them. Now that bonus is going to vest over that 10-year period, okay? But what that will do is that will offset the surrender charge. And so we're seeing contracts right now that have a bonus of 10, 12, 15, 18%. Okay. Typically a surrender charge is going to be 12 or less, right? And then the longer you're into the contract, the lower that's going to be.
It decreases over time.
And so if we look at a contract and the caps are 2, 3%, you know, or there's huge spreads, and we go, okay, this contract's not going to make any money. There's 2, 3 contracts that I will use right now. My parents have one of them. Okay. So, I mean, this is, you know, I don't, these are not things that I recommend lightly. Okay. But there are a couple that have uncapped indices. I mean, that we'll see 6, 8, 10, 12% on average.
Tell me when you can take a break. I want to read something. Go ahead.
And so what we want to do is we want to see, okay, does this policy make sense? Number one, should you even have it? Sometimes no.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
And if it does, is this optimal? Can this policy actually make you money?
Yeah.
And if not, can you replace it without losing money and be in a better position? And sometimes the answer is we're going to take a free withdrawal until it's gone and not pay a surrender charge. Other times we're going to make it work in the plan, or we may replace it. But you want to have someone who not only understands how these things work, but has other options.
Yeah.
That's the point.
This is the difference between the handyman with the hammer and the handyman with a whole array of tools. Oh, that's a screw. Probably a screwdriver's better than a hammer. It's you being able to, you're licensed to sell pretty much everything. And it's like, you know, I think this tool works best.
There's a time and a place.
It just makes sense. Okay. One of our listeners said regarding fixed index annuities, Guy, on Saturdays from 8 to 9 on WBAP Texas Radio Blank Financial Group advertises them. And if I had not listened to Ian, I would have believed their infomercial. They make them sound like the greatest no-lose investment ever.
Yeah.
So, this guy listened and with our information was able to cut through that infomercial and say, I don't think so.
And look, I mean, there is a place in a portfolio for this, you know, and really
just like there's a place for a hammer.
Yes.
But it doesn't fit everything.
Not, but it's not all of your money. Okay.
Right.
So, I mean, realistically, I mean, the maximum amount that I would be comfortable with is, I mean, maybe 50% of a portfolio.
Sure. And that's, rare circumstances.
Yeah, because, okay, again, what are we trying to do? Well, we need to make sure that when you have to have your portfolio create income for you, that you have a place to go that doesn't have the volatility that the stock market has.
Right.
That's not bonds.
Right.
Okay. Bonds have essentially the same. And so what we have to figure out is, in that period of time, how much income would you need to take? You know, if the stock part of your portfolio is down, how long will it be down? And so how long would we have to have another asset on the side to be able to withdraw money from? The alternative to this is cash. This is what other advisors do, is use cash. Okay. And that can sound great, right? I mean, you know, money markets are paying 3.5%, 4% right now. Great. They won't always be. Okay. That's number one. And number two, if we have the potential to make a little bit more than that, I think that makes sense.
So what are you willing to do to help people with this?
So we can do reviews of these policies. We need to see the latest statement from them. Typically I charge for this, Todd, because, you know, this is one of those things where if everything's free, you got to wonder what's really happening. You know, if you got a free plan, You go and they're like, oh yeah, we'll make a free plan for you. The question should be, okay, what are you actually selling?
Mm-hmm.
Typically, it's these kind of products,
Sure.
right? And so, our time is valuable. It does take a fair bit of time to look at these because we're going to look at. I'm going to actually look through the contract and understand how it works, and look at the alternatives.
Right.
So. But you asked if we would do some of these reviews for some of these folks.
I browbeat him down to help our listeners.
So typically I charge $100 to do these. I lose money on that, frankly. So we can do a few before the year's up, and we'll talk about whether we want to do some more.
Okay.
But they can call your office, call mine. It's up to you. Okay. But we just need to see the latest statement.
So if more than 50% of your investments are in annuities, you really need to have these things looked at and get a second opinion. If you go to the person who you bought it from, chances are they're going to say, "Oh, it's fine. Yeah, this is why we did it. It's fine." They don't want to be embarrassed. They don't want to, show you that they did not do well. And
you can't get a second opinion from the person who gave you the first opinion.
Yeah, you can't get a second opinion from the. Yeah, so we will look at this, no charge, and just Ian does what I do. It's not like, oh yeah, you should replace this without any explanation. Point to the language, point to the thing that says this is your problem and this is why it's your problem. It's not just we're trying to steal your business. It's we want to look at it. We want you to understand what's going on. We want you to fully understand this. And if you're happy with it, if we think it's good, absolutely stick with it.
Yeah.
But
it's pretty rare, I have to say.
Yeah, chances are if you bought it during low interest rates, they base that entire contract on that interest rates, and there are options out there. If you're going to have to pay a surrender charge, the company accepting your money will help cover that surrender charge, not directly, but in their plan they will give you bonuses that will make that surrender charge not seem so painful.
It's kind of like, and depending on how the contract is set up, it can be done without taxes too. So that's a question.
That's important.
But it's kind of like, over the last couple of years, the car market's been really weird. Mm-hmm. And so you could trade in a car and get like money back for it.
Exactly.
It's very similar to that is what we're seeing. And so the point is not like upend everything that you're doing, but if you own it, you should know why you own it. And would you buy it again today?
Yeah.
And if you wouldn't, you shouldn't own it.
Yeah, that's cool. Hey, Wimp, thanks for joining me. I miss you some days.
One of the things that happens too is the contracts that I see a lot of times, especially around here, they're not the best contracts available.
What?
And that's something that I guess we should talk about a little bit.
When
too,
you say you qualify that by saying available. Yeah.
So I had a conversation with a guy. He reached out to me on LinkedIn. He's a young advisor. He wanted to come work at my firm, and this is for real. And he does seminars and events around here all the time. Dinner events and stuff. Sure. And seemed like a nice guy. He has a faith background. Really nice. Talk the talk. Right? I'm like, okay. And he started asking me about how much I make on these products. And this is not a huge part of my business, really. Just transparently, right? Sure. Mm-hmm. And I said, I don't know. Like, maybe I'm a bad business. That's not the point, right?
Sure.
And he starts talking about, the compensation that he gets on this stuff. And I'm going, hang on. First of all, it is way above what, I called the company that I work with and I'm like, okay, what's market on this stuff? It's like almost twice that. So what he's selling is the product that is going to pay him the highest commission no matter what. Now, this shouldn't shock anybody, okay? But I'm like, if that's what you're leading with, trying to come work at my firm,
we're not a good match.
I was not polite about it, Todd, honestly.
Sure.
I was like, I hope I get to interact with some of your customers and get you out of their contracts because, like, not only am I never going to do business with you, like, it is just entirely reprehensible. And I see a lot of those contracts around.
And this is my frustration as being an attorney versus an investment person.
Yeah.
He sells those for $100,000 and the person gets their statement and it shows $100,000.
Yep.
And they're like, this is free.
Yep.
This guy made nothing. He just did this out of the goodness of his heart. And no, there's hidden fees in there that cashing out within the next 10 years,
the surrender charge is largely going to pay the commission.
Exactly. Whereas if I need someone to hire me, I'm like, you have to write me a check for X number of dollars. And they're like, oh my goodness, I don't think I want to do that. My investment advisor said I could do this. And when I put 100 in, there's 100.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no. So
this is one of those things that, we battle this. We battle the way that the system is set up. I mean, your home and auto works in a similar way, right? The commissions are built into the product. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I don't have a problem with people earning a living.
Sure.
Okay. That's not the issue. But if that's the only tool that they have and they have no thoughtfulness about how these things are used, that's where I have a problem. And I just think there's a better way. And I guess a final point on this. I really thought for a while about dropping my insurance licenses and not doing this, which is kind of interesting because I'm like, I don't want to be associated with those people. Like the kid that reached out to me looking for a job at my firm, I'm like, this, and it's not even worth like trying to educate him. It's like, sure, he's way too far, and I'm like, these are the people that give real, true financial planners a bad name. But what I realized was, I'm like, wait, that's not the right approach. I can't die on every hill. Okay.
But trust me, I know.
But there is in this case, I'm like, if there's not somebody who can do the right thing and does do the right thing, more people are going to get misled and mistreated.
Yeah. Well, just like you're saying, I've been, I bought this house and I use a heat and air system. And I'll just say, Brinker Heat and Air, I would highly recommend them. They've been out numerous times to look at my unit. It's probably 20 years old. And I know a lot of places would say, it's 20 years old. You need a new unit. Well, he just came out yesterday. It's not working right or something. And he came out and looked at it and he said, Todd, I don't see anything wrong with it. His son said, possibly you might need to replace it, but let's see if we can keep it going. The dad came out yesterday, looked at it and said, it's working fine. I'm not sure why it doesn't come on sometime. It could be this or that, but he did not mention, replacing, I brought it up. And so that convinced me that he's truly looking out for my best interest. He said, I made a few adjustments, tightened up some wires where he easily could have said, it's 20 years old. You need a new unit, but he didn't. And so he doesn't pay me for this. I'm just saying, I like to share good experiences that absolutely. I have. Brinker Heat and Air, to everything I've dealt with them, seem like they're honest, good guys. They're small, but they do a good job, and they've been totally honest with me. And they could have said, I sell heat and air units, you need a new unit, but they didn't. They worked on my unit that they did not install and kept it going, and it seems to be doing okay. So
this shouldn't be remarkable.
I know this is how it should be, but sadly, it's not.
Yeah, and we can't fix it all, but we want to try a little bit. Where we can help. So, Todd, for legal stuff, let's give the phone numbers. I know.
I was like, it's 9:30, right? No, it's stinking 10 o'clock. It's just like, this is the fastest hour of my life. If you want me to review your documents, which I highly recommend, if they've not been looked at in the last 5 years at least, please come see me. 479-601-4119, 479-601-4119. We are soon, come January 1st, or kind of now, we are known as Generations Legal Group, not Todd Whatley, PA. And we're moving to 28th and J Street, the big intersection there. There's a Casey's and some other business. It's very easy to find, so please come see me. We're going to do an open house in January sometime, 479-601-4119.
My number is 479-485-1911, 479-485-1911, justretirenow.com.
All right, fellas, we'll see you next week. You're listening to KURM, Rogers, Springdale, Bentonville, KURM FM, Graphic, Southwest Cities.